There's another live stream for the Species Coach. I'm not a licensed journalist. This is a gift for the species, humanity's body. The species volume science is simultaneous, hyper simultaneous with grouped, how we are grouped, ages, areas, locations, sexes. See black pupils, whites of eyes, an exception nature's course, with two additional identities of relativity that are as itself and incapable of being made up. We can only invent or reveal or make up things inside, what is also only increasing identity of volume, where and how it is to an extent discernible as space slash existence, with this one identity as itself, making more of itself through what is temporary slash lasting, which is also functional this way, where and how, and why, for example, many pray, because the sciences are being and having been abridged, self valued abridged, while self valued, self glorified, and exceptions in exception nature, counters to that, for example, and exceptions as one collusion, as an array, as illusion of difference, where this is difference is course. Boxing's a source alone. I'll drop the force, which as, as labeled such. Through arts and sciences, where the sciences appear to have different identities. It's relevant with this course, where how it is. Additionally, while it is positive or negative onto these three identities of order, finite, active, and progressive now, to an extent we know what is to come for the kids of New York City. What they call poverty and why and how it was employed has not been addressed. And why and how others pretended in the significance and the value of that also is already has been sustained employments at multi-front locations where was styles of logic, natures of logic, of human fact keeping nature, incapable of doing anything other but of self-valuing. Collusions at all databases tied locations. At other identity of overt criminal enterprises, natures of private ones originally still. Things that natures of them of criminal insidious have nothing to do with anything. Increasingly, where and how propagated roles just entertaining the crazy laws that colonization came with. It was complete possession of what everyone could say and how relative to what is good or bad as a torture method additional to the slavery method, not to keep the slavery, but to keep roles with what used colonization's members individually grouped and together, used remotely grouped too. Before, as was identity sophistication, before the smallest finite detail of modern countries, while through it, already complete possession of it, already having been collusions at other locations, through other natures of things, predicate X methods roles. My Lord, not pleased. They blamed encountering, are countering things like criminalizations, criminal enterprises, still has collusions with them. Specifically, for example, regarding the value of temporary slash lasting forever nature. and the extent of what is actually capable of being discerned by each individual, and by what is actually communicated by each individual in location. So one of the things, criminally foreign influence readings of statutes and uses of that are one of the things, for example, Jim Crow laws is about. Had nothing to do with color. Those exceptions were employed to pretend other and use the truth as a lie. Relevant to why and to how employed. Either by that breaching method, which extent employed everything, the motivations for everything. Or they just changed it, attach that person that went around in fake words, fake things in databases. Where and how really became self-value. Only three branches of government. And debates towards what the meaning of a name. So real science shows its identity of relativity to positive and negative simultaneously. The same way our identity actually is. But now it's through filtered identities as names individually grouped together. Tactile terrier. From uses as even we're all exceptions too. We're speaking about the real things. Speaking about blacks of eyes, white pupils. Black pupils, whatever. We're leaving out the breaching methods, how it employed uses of these colors, of the natural conversation that nature increasingly demonstrates to us. Simultaneously, how motivated we're roles blaming other things, others, ourselves for those demonstrations, also in the form of and as the real cause, singular, to a whole bunch of different individual causes, to as one of the things constant that were communicated by those crazy, worse than terror method laws, worse than torture method laws, worse than breaching method screening laws. Romulus and Remus science is more probable than that estimated as science or fiction by all formal estimating bodies. Yet, per the relevance of recorded self-value, roles with databases recorded having been and being employed consciously, where and how also as roles with a whole bunch of methods connected by the breaching method at all locations. People have been acting behavior, pretending passions and emotions, lies, and motivations, even when real, even when truths, used as lies. Where and how relevant is the relativity of differential criminal foreign influences that no one wanted to have. No one wanted those crazy things, but there were exceptions. If everyone's being naive, and that's because it's law forced by the law, and you're defending your sensibilities, your journalistic phrase, because it has a human phrase. So we have to get to understand human before we can get to use of the phrases and the sentences of the artists, of the scientists, of the leaders of the only three branches of government. And exception nature tied to that and tied to that. Where even, in fact, in other words, is overtly / insidiously exploited. Where and how the value of politics and the right to vote for one or other is used by a breaching method that already employed roles with that, using it for other motivations tied to its own, which is to measure and maintain that and how mandated law is not followed because of collusions between all kinds of natures of evil, self cultivate, may effectively maintain self cultivate. Two, but to counter this, every instance they're self valuing, fake things being and having been spoken to databases, roles with whole predicate acts methods that every modern country was conceived as an archetypal criminal enterprise and or collusions with it, where everybody individual grouped in together, because every individual body, the species individual body. It is more practical and more probable and is simultaneously increasingly demonstrable. For example, where Jesus Christ says he is the Alpha and he is the Omega, and where and how we learn things through the nature of the religions and through the books of the religions, distinctly, non distinctly, and simultaneously. And where relevant is that further hyper simultaneous. For example, as the value of what really was true before the smallest finite detail that we know is true always regarding American history, regarding other histories. Roles with the torture method is true always. Roles with that simultaneously left out and you as styles of logic, using all truths to screen the real causes of it, also not understanding the real cause of it. To differentiate, in other words, we have to blame the hyper invisible. We have to blame a hyper archetypal criminal enterprise. Or, additionally, as that discernible as self all the way self value is that and how humanity is an identity of negative value nature progression, with nature demonstrating to itself, to our consciousness, the real causes of this. But see, this is increasingly not being able to be discerned by people, while it is simultaneously other ways being more increasingly discernible. And it's relative to where and how they use language, like everyone gets behind calling it the environment, not nature. Everyone calls things debates when there are quality of fact in nature that forces entertain time. For example, there are a whole bunch of people tied to Robert Rodriguez, who they apparently took pictures of him once on Maple Street, Route 3, that goes by a state judicial branch office in Connecticut. Robert Rodriguez, for example, and involved also with a shopping center in Rocky Hill. Also involved, timed with people on through time on and off the state judicial branch offices. Involved with former director of the FBI, Robert Luskin, former standing chairperson on Racketeering Influence and Corrupt Organization Act, and a Tom, people associated with the Potter family that works there, and others that that had people lied to them about me behind my back, and had them respond to things I said online as collusions. Like, for example, they don't even know, and some of them do though. There is a Fianza family that have been influenced by people associated with Kevin Dillon and with Anna Dillon and how she switches the name Anna Dillon. And they have roles also with. Also, with corners of the streets and name stacking people involved planting databases involved with wire crimes with the Wethersfield police and with businesses and with locations and people calling the police that have been with other police forms with this field police through time and private tied to that. And the fake difference as people timed roles with overt criminal enterprises, private ones in the witness protection program, and body dumping spots. Also connected as roles with some of the things where they bring up these natures of things, increasingly connected uses of them that are individually timed uses of that, use of that singular by the breaching method, and this being relevant to where and to how we have not used those things hyper evidential that nature shows us to answer the questions about how best to use time with each age of fact treatment nature and in response to what emotions and passions are about and in response to what the value of database relationships is there and other 15 identity grounds, identity of relationships to itself. And this being where demonstrably each identity as a volume. It has two other identities of value, progression, only perfect simultaneously, equally. And with and as all exceptions and exception nature appearing to be in demonstration of other things. They are simultaneously in demonstration of the same thing, singular generating all things, and simultaneously being in demonstration of what exceptions and exception nature is about, which is inseparable from what and how it uses a special difference and difference. Where and has where and how the identity of space / existence actually is. And actually how languages and the sciences have been reviewed, not just to teach, but have been revealed. Follow evolution science only feels like games. Who trains? New York City, especially New York City, the boroughs, for example. A lot of other countries in America, they have a unique imposition upon themselves for the breaching methods, uses of all locations, everywhere the species body is, and where and how it values. Logic leaving out the significance and the value of its way, use of value. How things are. These are 5 distinct identities of sequence / simultaneous nature. Each one as a trinity. Each person as something. It is coming to and from, and with and for. It is with and for each thing. As it. Everywhere something is. Everywhere something can be made up. Totally fake. It is coming to and from. And while with and for that as value, as itself, the identity that's hyper-simultaneous, the identity of forever nature, that is the identity as time. That is showing us to understand and to discern how it is bound, how they are bound. The 3 volumes, the extent of time that we know was true always about the past. And that what we read and everything like that. As nature, the birds fly, the concrete cannot grow. The things that feed the positive value nature progressions, acts and natures associated with why and how all day people hunger and or all day or night. And while other simultaneous is the course of things so hyper simultaneous increasingly, for example, as an example of how the hyper identity, the hyper relativity, your breaching method put theories forward to measure and maintain roles entertained. For example, so there are spots in Rocky Hill and in Wethersfield with shopping centers since before our founders were born that are roles with the intelligence community. There's a people with the name Daryl Chandler. And he has a family member with the intelligence community. I don't even know their names. Involved also recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed a whole bunch of overt criminal enterprises, private ones, in the interbranch, planting a little magic tricks, illusions, predicate acts, methods at corners of buildings, and regarding their motivations for that, where and how they're taking collusions with identity theft frauds with complete strangers and sequence shift roles. Also as timed uses of that as the names interstates, Washington, D.C., and New York City, and Vermont, and Rhode Island. Rolls on off with the names on off the state judicial branch offices. A whole bunch of people tied to a Delaferro family, and to a Rob Schedule, and to a other boyfriends of people in the Sclera and the Spada family involved with a Ray Cololo, who asked me a bunch of times in a row. One time they made exception, fake exception, and pretending to know me, planting evidences, planting fake motivations. Asked me if I was intimately tied with them. Also to simultaneously, without saying it, pretend I had ties to a Delaferro family, who's also one of the ones involved behind my back with predicate accessing databases and trying to make fake exceptions to make it so, for example, also relevant where and how. They have the word extremism used. And these are being people involved and have been people involved with predicate acts on roles off the World Trade Center. It has ties to fire departments and to shopping centers and to malls and to medical locations and to private medical locations, to psychiatry. Is recorded involved with crime methods with torture methods / identity theft / fraud methods with overt criminal enterprises, private ones, other countries, their family members, everyone around them at the same time, relevant to it, has roles with this. A whole bunch of people with Korean families have roles attaching little kids with Italian people from, there's a Tony DeMauro with people from other countries, and a Joe DeMauro years before that. And then there are 2 Jerry Kerrs at least, and there's 1 Michael Kerr, and I don't know the mother's name. These are people involved with insurance companies, investigators with them, not just the former director of the FBI, Robert Luskin. These are people with houses next to campuses that have been with the names next to the houses and businesses, and even a post office next to one of the campuses. Further involved with the courts and the interbranch, planting evidences with other countries, planting fake motivations, planting themselves incapable of defending themselves, and of affording what's actually being and having been communicated to each person properly to be discerned and on time because of how, where, and how they're recorded using each age and nature of campus, sickly distinctly, and the difference of that consciously, where and how it is, where and how we are syntactically manifest, and having had faith applied, where groupthink is also involved, with formal uses of words like extremism simultaneously with and as criminally foreign influence, fact, human nature, quality, aspects in nature, and simultaneously tactically delusions wrought, and simultaneously tactically consciously being and having been a part with whole wire crime methods and predicate acts relevant. Weathersfield Pizza has a whole bunch of people involved with it. I never saw Maria Vizina on one Weathersfield campus in my life. There are people involved with her and Steven Stocko on and off Central Connecticut State University and on and off Route 3, and with people all along Route 3 that may try. There are people that were also involved with the vertical and horizontal. There are people that made exceptions that I saw off campus, like Mark Violet. I never saw Mark Violet on campus except for one or two times, real quick, on on Weathersfield High School. Never saw him middle school and the grammar school. They're connected people involved with my grammar school and other schools where they're making us use other people's names so we can't speak good about other people. Or so we have to speak bad about them the way they need everyone to speak about each other, increasingly from other locations, needing to self value. How having been sustained was from all locations, rolls with the logic and the syntax and the defenses of it that can't be defended and afford simultaneously the short words proper, therefore the protraction of them, let alone. So they value roles with switching names, forging names, and with magic tricks that effectively kept and keep distinct identities of criminal enterprises, adults and kids, with the interbranch, and with overt criminal enterprises mixed, adults and kids, timed uses of corners of buildings and of streets, relevant leading up to the World Trade Center attack, in the Trade Center attack context, timed uses of it, also with that singular use, also relevant, manifest at all kinds of all locations, areas, and states, everywhere the species body stands. So species go extinct. So we have self-valued that which was designed tactically denatured while sustaining that torture method necessary to be sustained, while as simultaneously as a slavery method against every individual, even the ones it would make self, help with this. Our founders had to counter extort to other founders and then force them to sustain cover-ups of that. Having to self-value that, and how there was still thank God, the human resistance as the difference of Native Americans already having been separated, sustained from their short words, the way they wanted and needed, as directed by nature, as revealed by nature, through their own, as our own humanity, before the sciences became criminally foreign influence and self valued that way. Forced, tricked, hurt, self persuaded, self valued now stuck that way. Self valued roles going to outer space. Meanwhile, everything's tactically denatured. They have basically the only perennial vegetable is the asparagus. For example, there are proofs that they tactically denatured and forced everyone to meet and to need to be valued nature systems. That everything would have to be measured and maintained by and as criminal insidious in its nature. That increasingly would have to self-value that as the only means to counter all that's tied to where how the preaching method works. All stupid jerks pretending other. Pretending order means other. Same way those kids become killers. The interbranch and the difference that is employed and was effectively discerned. Forgiveness is to interpret and to tell and to defend the law, not relative as who's guilty or not, relative to what is true always, not denying the slightest exception, not valuing the slightest exception denied or having been denied or set up to be denied, which all three of those things are inherent to the logic. They're active to the logic, increasingly, demonstrably, conjunctive to the logic that would deny. If those little boys or girls, the men or women, let alone the little boys or girls, in New York City, in cities across the where the species is now, don't forget the suburbs were tactically denatured. Slavery was entrenched before our founders were even born. They had to hide their roles, countering it by counter-extorting other people. For they would have been hurt by themselves because of the nature of the law forcing all the roles so they could measure and maintain. Because if your roles with that, you're hurting other people to an extent, and nature's going to keep demonstrating it. It's not. It's you know. You don't bring up economics, leaving out the identity theft and fraud, slander method against our founders. That method that recorded, if you're honest, a breaching method measured and maintained what they left us to communicate for themselves as the peak sophistications capable of doing such as collusions, self-valued roles with the people worst capable of it, because we never read the legal books, things like that. All the difference identity has been used for another course. In other words, we have black pupils, whites of eyes, and exception nature. We have such evidences and such hyper evidential left out and repeatedly blamed on things you don't allow people to blame through decades, through lifetimes. Racism, for what is worse, that is even more capable. In other words, a predicate acts delivery system method roles, criminal insidious natures of positive and negative and identity treatment roles. Natures too. offensively, simultaneously, preemptively, actively, and for things to come. And blaming other things all the time. I've lost my train. This is enough. Thank you. Boxing, Babaderos is one of the things. So that I want to give to the species body, and we can all do these things and become better at what we can do by admitting that modern countries A through Z are archetypal criminal enterprises as a certain type of victim slash hyper victim, also grouped as criminal insidiousness natures. There are styles of syntax. There are styles of positive, negative identity, exception nature, and a special difference treatments with short words that can't defend themselves and afford proper what each subject really comes with to be have its discernment. Would even the religious books are about the value of what is really first written up at the beginning of the Old Testament, at the beginning of the Quran. The value of that is only increasing. And that also is evidence. But that is also a nature of conversation. That the identity of the ground, locations where the sciences as to having been told are manifest. As what can't defend itself and simultaneously for it. The quality of fact should be nature. For example, necessary to use to explain evolution science only feels like games because we take conjunction with its systems I positive that's also positive unto itself. Not it's only natural. It's natural, but not as criminal insidiousness per its system law. You can't legalize that. And so there were uses of that. So rolls with that sick thing. You don't think there's something more sick there? Yes. We know this. But we have to use what is true always, not denying the slightest exception, not valuing the slightest exception, having been denied, going to be denied. That nature of truth. There are proofs. That's what nature is showing us. There's a difference. They were using truth for lies. They're using truth to screen lies simultaneously. All roles with the breaching method, individually grouped and together, where they use our names, species bodies. So yours and the species body, the groups cannot speak for us. So the branches of government speak other than they pretend they can to be able to discern. Now that needs to self-value. How crazy people go crazy with groups and do crazy groupthink because it gives them an excuse. Just like they have excuses, everybody, why they're blaming, denying the significance of where and how having black pupils, whites of eyes. The second someone opens their mouth regarding color treatments, you see that distinctly. You see your humanity. Say second one, they try to counter it and blame it on racism. You see it. Fake. Criminal insidious nature of positive negative treatment, identity collusion, identity theft collusions. Slavery was about a whole bunch of countries individually grouped in together as identities of the law, as natures of the law, as the physics of the law, sickly, distinctly, non-distinctly, and simultaneously as collusions. Not wanting to be hyper simultaneous collusions, but increasingly so self-valuing, because all those locations and names were and are effectively used remotely, or they attach that person to change words, fake words. and or exploit where and how they exploited this already. Positing illusions effectively used to keep all identities and natures and physics of the law criminally foreign influenced and being held, having been self-valued that way. Increasingly needing to hide live progressions at those locations for reasons no one realizes. I think going right back to the same locations with people needing to pretend, you know, this is there's all kinds of there are all kinds of things relevant, but mandated law is prevented by those charged with it because of the roles with sequence shifts planting, people saying and pretending things at locations to exploit where and how they set up what which trials were about, even if they were made up. How the interbranch would pretend to be against crime, but and to pretend to be for torture and for punishment of people and for corrections of people as means to hide as means to hide and as uses of themselves also used having been used remotely, all identity ground locations and roles with stacking illusions and databases, and increasingly with the exceptions where other people do that for them, and where everyone's increasingly self-valuing this being and having been done between ourselves and everyone. So there are people from Korea, Pakistan, Italy, Russia, and people from Weathersfield recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed, intercities. They have roles with the names. Like there's a whole bunch of people tied to Richard Casper and the spots next to the state capital of Connecticut with names on and off of it, involved with predicate acts methods relative, individually grouped and together, where relative is discernible criminally foreign influenced uses remotely of the branches of government, being and having been self-valued, criminally foreign influence before Jim Crow laws, during Jim Crow laws, and since. And this is not to counter it by countering it as something other than it was, as something other than, or as something that was hyper additional put in there so could be blamed for, instead of rather the breaching method. That use of the summary of the summary of the laws individually grouped and together sick, criminally foreign influence. Consciously that's set up for the torture method, slavery method, the suburbs. All that would be capable only of unfolding as the cities. They knew. Now these little boys and girls, and or their parents, they're stacked on. Good things happen better. People, a whole bunch of people, a whole bunch of criminal and seditious natures of positive treatments, negative treatments, and identity treatments as styles of logic would simultaneously incapable of admitting, of defending, admitting the significance of that being set up as a torture trap worse than slavery. Because slavery, torture trap, and method by it that also employed uses of it where no one's watching, not just that, not just all it does with it sickly, how they use it at other locations. What really their motivations are. So the executive branch and the political branch when I was growing up, when I was in second grade, in third grade, also per the roles communicating also from off campuses influences, criminally foreign influence uses of the sensibilities of everyone and everyone around them, uses of spying on what they're going to say, everyone, relative to where and how, especially everyone who's gonna care about Native American rights, Black rights, and the exception nature, rights, how sickly distinctly victims, how effectively simultaneously, sickly non-distinctly, instead of self-valuing it, everyone's too busy self-valuing criminal insidiousness natures of means to cause positives out of negatives, criminal insidious natures of positives. Meanwhile, we have the means to cause hyper positive that is also positive out of negative that is also positive unto itself and everywhere at once. Evolution's fruits, gifts, means out of nowhere. This is regarding where and how we are fact cheating nature. This is regarding impositions upon the people of New York City, sickly distinctly from the rest of Americans. So, attend! The Burroughs book is here. New York, my friend. The identity's law. No, I could teach them how to speak from here. You have to follow here because the FBI, other agencies have roles with wire crime acts and methods with a Steven Stocko and people at Weathersfield Pizza and the locations next to it, real and or made up. The shooting of the person in front of there is also involved with interbranch at locations, with the overt criminal enterprises, private ones, and exception nature, people that run the prisons, people that and religious spots, all that where things are made that people will say are positive or negative, with different is relevant. These are people on off Central Connecticut State University. No, there's people at UConn. Please, to UConn, help. People tied to Mark Violet. They made it, maybe took a picture of me around a Mike Violet. I never had a word of conversation with him. We never had a conversation. They were trying to make it look like that at the same time. There's a pattern of people who did that, tied to and who brought up uses of religion and culture and some KKK themed and black themed military police forms. People involved with predicate acts with the databases, switching and forging names, not letting people know names, criminally foreign influence uses of investigations and of investigators and of their sources and of them and of their roles with methods of them bringing up organized natures of organized crime and names and things, and then asking people to answer questions on that, forcing them, tricking them, hurting them, persuading them to roles, faking things into records, attaching other kids through time without them even realizing. Kids who never communicated went into the police station as a kid to pretend, or as an adult, to make a police report. They pretended conversation with me when I went to go get a police report paper. They attached me then because there's a Phil Cololo involved with the Bob Chase, with various natures of courts and police forms on off the Weathersfield Police Department from his roles at forensics locations, at Whiting Forensics, and with state police locations involved with people with the name Cololo and Scalora, also on off interstates locations, Florida, Washington, with or Florida, and the World Trade Center and the court next to it. Also rolls with people on off Trinity College with Predicate X, on off CCSU, and rolls with that with their uses of their Facebook pages and their narratives and backgrounds, forging and switching names, and with little tricks they do, where and how they have recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed the intelligence community, including the interbranch. For example, they make confessions and the exceptions tied to them, but they make confessions and have others demonstrated true. And this is recorded, but they are also recorded hiding this by pretending things are recorded. And they are demonstrating it's tied to their roles consciously with these other countries. These are also there was a Joshua Julian who's involved on off the Facebook page of a principal child abusers campus, then and now, with more people involved with upskirt pictures with the FBI and with courts on off Elm Street and on off New Britain locations and Hartford locations and West Hartford locations, leading up to the World Trade Center attack and since. They've been doing little tricks and backgrounds to keep hidden how already better than perfectly used remotely criminally foreign influence are all investigations, all investigators, and all identities of perception, and or they attach that person to fake words, change words, and with the people around them. And they lie about the outcome of legal cases past and planting evidences as roles with them active now, and why and how such a way. Why, how all human resources are damage controls is still all incapable of countering that set up tactically denatured for torture slavery method sustained since before our founders' parents were born. The suburbs were designed. The laws were out of their mind. Sick. Pretending others simultaneously. There's a trinity here. It's not A, B, exception. Exception nature also comes with more. See, these five identities of sequence / simultaneous nature, each one simultaneously as a trinity at the same time. Note that making 15. This is also relevant where and how simultaneously too. To the extent that ground is us and we are the ground. That is 30, no. Myself promote. And it's 45. Till we're that is grouped. And there is constantly the value of its identity of relationship to itself, positive or negative. That is also only increasing, but this relative to where and to how. It uses value multiple ways to show how one way, constantly only better, only perfectly increasing, only capable of being. And we could kite this, and we could ground this. Who disbelieves. So this is the programming too. We could put forward. I'll take way less than it's worth. Just someone who's going to defend it. Someone who wants to believe, put big money. The ancient snow people. They're the perfect manifest representation of this, using those evidences as they are actually recorded. Thank God, having been preserved, but as they're actually properly preserved to be. Yin Yang and Alpha and Omega. This is relevant to the difference between and the non-difference. Alpha and Omega cannot part. I mean, Yin Yang cannot part. The human species body has an alpha and omega 3 identities of relationship to itself. It has nothing to do with physics or sex. Exception, nature. These are three distinct identities of relationship to itself that one identity of volume has. That is the one that has not just our species, but other species manifest this way. Individual group together, male, female, species body. In cell nucleus, cell body, cell wall, /S, body of value discernment, hyper discernment, simultaneously. Vaccines to teach us things that no one's here thinking about. Anyway.